They're waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa.
A good game is relatively common, a great game less so. But a game that single-handedly changes the landscape of its genre and the medium of gaming as a whole, that's something very special indeed. The first-person shooter, or FPS, saw its mainstream birth with the release of the original Wolfenstein 3D in early 1992. These concepts were later improved upon by 1993's Doom and 1996's Quake. But by the late 90s, the genre was beginning to get stale, stuck within the limitations set by the original Doom. The FPS needed something new and fresh to stay relevant. Valve Software was founded by former Microsoft employees Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington in 1996. Their first project would be a science fiction-themed action FPS slated for release in late 1997, with the first alpha build of the game being shown at E3 earlier that year. But a priority of quality over deadline saw the game delayed by a year. You are placed in the shoes of 27-year-old MIT graduate Gordon Freeman, a man of few words, and our protagonist in this journey. The game begins with you riding the tram into work, while an automated announcement system gives off information about the world. It's an interesting way to begin an action game, but a very memorable one indeed. You can tell through this opening scene that the game puts a much heavier emphasis on storytelling and world building than a game like Doom or Quake. Once you arrive at work, you equip your hazardous environment suit, or HEV, and make your way down to the anomalous materials lab. The scientists give you a brief overview of today's experiment before having you push a strange alien sample into the antimass spectrometer, beginning the resonance cascade and opening a rift across realities, prompting an alien invasion. This event in particular was interesting as it was likely one of the first times that you as the player were involved in the inciting incident in the story. After the resonance cascade, you begin your desperate attempt to escape the facility. The game makes you backtrack through the now destroyed lab before granting you the now iconic crowbar. The facility has now been overrun by a large variety of strange alien species, the most of which aren't friendly. The game likes to put long pauses in between granting you new weapons so as to not make you feel too invulnerable. However, this also makes getting new weapons all the more special. It is around a quarter way through the game that you encounter your first human from outside of the facility. The Hazardous Environment Combat Unit, or HCU for short, are sent in to clean up the mess at Black Mesa, as well as silence any survivors. Throughout the rest of the game, you continue to fight and navigate your way through the facility before entering Xen. Xen is a strange alien world, where the invasion started from. It's one of the most difficult chapters of the game, focusing more on platforming and puzzle solving, and is generally considered one of the weaker chapters of the game. Half-Life was released on November 19th, 1998, to massive critical and commercial success thanks to its immersive world, revolutionary storytelling, and fresh, action-packed gameplay. Post-release, the game saw 2 expansions and a handful of ports, including Half-Life Opposing Force in 1999 and Blue Shift, as well as the PS2 co-op campaign, Half-Life Decay, in 2001. These expansions were popular, but the true star of the show were the modders. Half-Life was a relatively easy game to mod, as its game engine was largely open source, and mods could be plugged directly into the game's launcher, spawning a massive community of modders, some of which were hired by Valve and later worked on full retail releases based on the mods they made for Half-Life. But without a doubt, the most influential mod was the original Counter-Strike beta released in 1999. One of the biggest impacts of Half-Life was Counter-Strike, a competitive multiplayer tactical shooter with a terrorist versus counter-terrorist theme. The original mod was released on June 19, 1999, with a full retail release from Valve in November of 2000. Counter-Strike became a massive success, and the franchise has stayed at the top of most played lists for over 20 years. One of the biggest developments of the original Counter-Strike was bringing esports to the mainstream. Esports had been around for a few years at that point, but Counter-Strike made people pay attention to this untapped market, and a wave of sponsors and tournaments ensued. Many prominent e-athletes today began their careers with the original Counter-Strike 1.6. Half-Life has transcended gaming, and in many ways has become more than just a game. It has spawned a massive community of modders, e-athletes, artists, content creators, and players that has thrived for well over 2 decades. This year marks the 23rd anniversary of the original Half-Life, and although the game has some flaws and hasn't aged perfectly, it is, in retrospect, still one of the greatest PC games of all time.